How's it? And welcome back. So I recently did some mastering for the band Imperial Destruction, death metal band from Cape Town, South Africa. They recently dropped their new single called Ecdysis, available on all streaming platforms now. So be sure to go have a listen to the song. I'll drop all of the links below so that you can go show them some support. This is their first release in a few years. I think it's been like 6 or 7 years since they've dropped some new music. So it's super exciting seeing them become active again. There are some other stuff in the pipeline from them as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But for today, we're going to have a look at how I mastered Ecdysis, the new single from Imperial Destruction. Alright, let's have a listen to the song so that we can actually get an idea of how it goes and what the vibe is, and then after that, I will show you how we got this sound. Alright, you get the idea. Super thick sounding mix, and that was the idea. We wanted to go for a very round sound. In fact, that was the only sort of request the band had, was they wanted a very round sounding master. So that was the goal, is to get everything sounding as round and warm and thick and powerful as I can without it being overbearing. So let's have a look at how I did this, how I mastered this song. Firstly, we have the virtual tape machine plugin from Slate Digital. The input is set at 0. I really didn't touch it at all. All this is doing is just adding a little bit of saturation and just sort of thickening and smoothing out the track a little bit. I love this thing. This is always the first thing I do with any master. Up next, we have some EQ from Slate Digital. I used the Neve style EQ and this custom series style EQ, adding a little bit of top end in both cases just to give the track a little bit more sort of sizzle up top. And then some more EQ with this Waves Pultec style EQ. We have a little bit of bottom end added, as well as a little bit of tippy top end, 16 kilohertz, a little bit of air, just to get it sounding a bit more polished. Up next, some more EQ. This is mainly filtering. I'm using this in mid-side. The mid signal is filtered at about 30 hertz, and the sides are filtered at about 100 hertz. And then I'm also dipping out a little bit of harshness at 6K on the sides only. And then the overall signal is getting a little bit of dip here at 317 hertz, just to get rid of some boxiness. After that, we have some compression. I'm using the FG Gray as well as the FG Red. It's a SSL master bus style compressor and a Focusrite style compressor. The FG Gray is set to a pretty slow attack and very fast release with a 2:1 ratio. High pass filter at 66 hertz, just so that we don't have the kick drum triggering too much of the compressor. And then with the FG Red, it's barely doing anything. It's really just gluing things a little bit. I've got the attack set to a little bit faster. We also have the release set to auto, also 2:1 ratio. And we've got the drive set to about 7, which is just adding a little bit of grit to the track, which is very nice. As well as a 90 hertz high pass. Once again, we don't want that kick drum triggering the compression too much. Up next, we have the FabFilter Saturn. I love this plugin so much. This is my favorite plugin in the world, hands down. It's basically just saturating the mid-range and the top end of the track a little bit. The low end is left unsaturated. So the mid-range is getting 40%. And the top end is getting like 35%. And I'm also EQing the presence of the top end down by a little bit, just to not have things be too harsh, because it's very easy for that to happen when using it in mastering especially. Up next, we have some multiband compression, the Pro MB. I love this thing so much. It's definitely my favorite multiband compressor I've used. The Waves C4 and C6, they're also really nice, but I just like the feel of this one more, and it just does the job the best for me. So let's actually have a listen to what this is doing so that we can actually see how it's balancing everything out. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this section and we can have a listen. So as you can see, it's the low band that's working the hardest, and it's really just sort of evening out the kick and the bass guitar's energy. So it's like a nice consistent low end that we're getting. Up next, we have the TG mastering chain from Waves, and this is mainly just doing some EQ as well as a little bit of stereo spreading. So let's have a look at the EQ, adding a little bit of 8K in the mid channel, using this in mid side, by the way. So the mid channel is getting a little bit of 8K and a little bit of 60 hertz. So a little bit of top, a little bit of bottom, and the sides I'm actually taking out 16K just to tame the sort of cymbals mostly, actually. If I remember correctly, that was the thing that was getting a little bit harsh. So that's what that was. And then mid-range, this is something I love doing on the sides because it brings out the guitars a little bit more, since the guitars are generally a mid-range instrument, boosting 1.4K on the sides. And that's it for EQ. We're boosting this spreader knob by 0.8, and what this is doing is it's just spreading the whole track a little bit to make it sound wider. But always important to be very subtle with this thing, otherwise you can really mess up the mix and things can start sounding phasey and weird. Up next, Flatline from Submission Audio. This is an amazing plugin. I love this thing. It has definitely done wondrous things to my masters. It's a better limiter, basically. Instead of reaching for a limiter to get signal louder, more often than not, I'll go for this because this doesn't squash the transients as much. In fact, it kind of clips them. This is an analog clipping plugin, essentially. And yeah, this is what I use to get that extra little bit of push in terms of level out of a master without sacrificing the transient detail like a lot of limiters do. After that, we have the Soothe from Oak Sound, or Oak Sound. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And this is just getting rid of some harshness at around 8K and around 5K. And this is set to 83%, so it's not affecting the entire signal. There is, 17% of the signal unaffected, still being let through. So it's working in parallel, if you will. Up next, we have the L2 limiter. And this is just to get a little bit more level out of the track without actually doing any limiting. As you can see, these faders were barely moved. I'm just going to play a little bit so that you can see that there isn't any attenuation happening here. So as you heard with me bypassing and putting it back in there, it definitely adds a little bit of level, but it doesn't kill the transients like a lot of limiters do. And the key here is just the fact that we're not actually limiting, we're not attenuating anything. So it's just very subtly pushing the signal a little bit. Up next, okay, so this is pretty crazy. As you can see, there's a lot of cuts happening here. This is just, yeah, this is definitely not something that you want to do. But in this case, we had a really hard time getting the cymbals to not sound very harsh. So the cymbals that were used and just the way that they were sort of processed and mic'd up, I'm not sure what it was. And also just all of the stuff that I did in mastering here led to a pretty harsh sound in the overheads. And with us going for a very sort of round sound with this master, we really wanted to tame that. So this is me just going back, tweaking, going back, tweaking. So I'm not even going to go over this. It's a bunch of cuts just to kind of get rid of that sort of cymbal harshness. So let's actually have a listen to what this does. I'm going to play the song again, and I'm going to bypass it and put it back in, and then we'll see what it does to the cymbals specifically. So as you can hear, it's doing quite a lot. The track definitely sounds a little bit brighter with this bypassed, but the cymbals are pretty harsh, and especially on some speaker systems, it just becomes like piercingly harsh. So we wanted to sort that out, and this is how I ended up doing it. Up next, we have the R bass from Waves. Now, generally, this isn't really used in mastering, but I love using this in mastering. The keyword is being subtle, right? You need to just use it subtly. So I'm just adding a little bit of 43 hertz, just that sort of sub bigness that we wanted to add into the track a bit more. And this is barely up. You know, it is definitely doing something, but it's not overbearing. If I were to bypass this and re-export it, I'm sure the master would still sound fine, but we wanted that sort of big, larger than life type sound. So that's why we went for this one. And then another instance of Soothe. So yeah, once again, the cymbals were just very harsh still. And I was having a hard time getting them under control. And I ended up reaching for another instance of this plugin. And yeah. And then the limiter I use is the Fab Filter Pro L2. I love this limiter. It's my favorite limiter. It's really nice. We got the attack set to the slowest. The release is pretty fast at 37 milliseconds, and we've got it set to the dynamic style, and we're doing about 6 dB of gain being added on. So yeah, that's everything. Let's actually just have a listen to how the track sounds without the plugins on, so that we can get an idea of what everything is doing. And by the way, this is just the plugin I'm using to actually record this video, so it doesn't have anything to do with the sound. That's why I didn't go over that now. So I'm going to bypass all of the plugins except the limiter, just so that we can have a relatively similar level between the two comparisons. So let's have a listen. So yeah, that's how I mastered the new Imperial Destruction single called Ecdysis. Go have a listen to the song on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your music. I'll put some links in the description. Go show them some support. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate that. Let me know if you have any questions about anything I did in the video in the comments below. And then I will see you in the next one.